Welcome from the deep. I am Mike the Finder.
And I am Book of Brett.
And today we are doing something that we've never done before. We're going to be reviewing a television series rather than a movie, or at least one season of it. Today we're going to be talking about The Bear from 2022. If we're going to review a TV series, we might as well start somewhere that you and I both have a significant amount of experience in, because we have both worked in kitchens.
From.
Yeah, I mean, I have worked in kitchens as a cook before. You were a waiter for many years. We both have significant.
I also did dishes.
Right.
But yeah, I never got around to cooking.
Right.
Because that.
Yeah,
mostly.
I mean. You and I have had this conversation before, and I will say it again here because it is important and worth repeating.
Trigger warning. Trigger warning.
Especially if you're a waiter. The waiters do a quarter of the work of the back of the house guys, and the back of the house guys get paid compared to waiters. That's how it is.
Yeah.
It's how it's always been. And the more work gets paid less, and it's garbage. And I will feel like that forever. I'm sorry to any of the waiters out there who feel differently. That's just how it is. And for me, one of the things that I was looking forward to in this show is to see how they really handled that, because this is about the back of the house. This is not about...
There is no front of the house in this show.
No, not really. Like, we see it, but very...
Yeah, but the dude running the front of the house is Richie, and he's also back of the house. But that's because this is not like a fancy fine dining or like hardcore sit down restaurant. This is like a cheesesteak, not cheesesteak, but this is a sandwich shop in Chicago.
Right. So let's start off by doing what we always do. Do you want to give us broad strokes here about what The Bear is about, and then we'll jump over to IMDb?
Yeah, this one's a little bit more challenging because there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, give me broad strokes.
I will try and keep this as simple as possible. As far as season 1 goes, season 1 is about Carmen. Yeah, Carmen inheriting a restaurant from his brother who committed suicide, a restaurant that is struggling and not doing well, and then trying to basically and Carmen has a very, very long professional background in very high-end kitchens, and he's basically trying to whip his staff into shape and get the restaurant in order.
Yeah, it's
while dealing with a lot of other bullshit going on too.
Specifically Richie. Richie is a big part of this.
Self-destructive.
Yeah, he's a big part of the show. We'll get there. So let's jump over to IMDb real quick. This is a TV series. It's from 2022. It's half-an-hour episodes, which I have to say, I felt the entire time watching this, these should be hour-long episodes. 30 minutes is far too short for what I think they're trying to accomplish, and that was confirmed to me when I got to the final episode, and it was double the length of all of the other episodes in this season, right?
And it didn't feel too long.
No, it didn't. Not at all. So this is a drama. The creator is Christopher Storer. He also directed many of these. He also wrote a lot of them, too. This stars Jeremy Allen White. A young chef from the fine dining world returns to Chicago to run his family's sandwich shop. Now, this has an 8.5 out of 10 on IMDb, which is one of the reasons I really wanted to do this. You know, Brett, that I am in the middle of watching The Sopranos right now. And as I've been watching The Sopranos, I keep hearing The Bear. You need to watch The Bear. Watch The Bear. It is a phenomenal TV show. You need to watch this. And I kept saying to myself, I got to finish The Sopranos first. This is something that I don't want to. If I get away from The Sopranos, I'm never going to go back and finish it. But when we decided to start doing this, I was kind of excited because I've been waiting around to watch this because, like I said, I really enjoy Matty Matheson's stuff. And when I found out he was a part of this show, I really wanted to watch this. So had you heard of this show before we decided to do this?
I had not heard of this show or Matty Matheson.
Interesting.
I still don't know who Matty Matheson is. I don't know any of his content. I went and looked him up, but I've never seen anything about Matty Matheson.
That's not surprising. You don't watch a lot of like Vice or YouTube stuff like that, like cooking shows and stuff. So that's not surprising.
No, I don't. I don't care. And it's honestly because of working in restaurants for 11 years. I was really reluctant to watch this. I'm not going to lie. I was really reluctant to watch this because restaurants are a sore subject for me as far as working in them. It is a constant fear that one day I will end up back in a restaurant if other doesn't just keep working the way it has been.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah, so I was really reluctant to watch this, but I was like, F it, I'll give it a shot. And I gotta say, I'm really glad I did.
Yeah, so with that, let's not get too far into specifics here, but give me. I don't want to be like, let's talk about episode 1 and then 2 and then 3. I do want to kind of go through them, but in very, again, broad strokes. So give me your overall thoughts of season 1 of The Bear, because there's a lot to talk about here. I think we're going to try to keep this at about an hour, but we're going to see how this goes. So give me broad strokes and your overall thoughts.
Overall, it's incredibly accurate. Like, it's insane how accurate they made it to the kitchen, to the restaurant industry, from just the way everything works back in the kitchen. And I gotta say, like, even though I was mostly a waiter, I was back in the kitchen helping out the chefs a lot to do with because of how you said the back of house gets treated in the industry versus the front of house.
Yeah.
And so I was always one of those servers that was back there helping out a lot, in any way that I could or any way that the chef would let me. But the way it's incredibly accurate down to how it works in a restaurant, both back of the house and front of house. It's also very accurate as far as the personalities that you're going to run into working in a restaurant.
Absolutely.
For better or worse. Because there are all of these personalities I recognize. I recognize all of these personalities. Like, Richie's a great example. I worked at a high-end fine dining restaurant where we had a sous chef that was like Richie, and me and that dude were at each other's throats on a constant basis because he was like Richie, and Richie is the way that he is, and then I've got my own temper because your tempers are flaring in a restaurant. Like, I don't care what side of the restaurant you're on, they're flaring. And so, like, Richie, at first I hated Richie because of that. And then we've got Tina. Tina's another great example where you've got somebody that's been in the same place for years and years. They're comfortable with how it works. They don't like change, and they think it should stay the way that it is. And sometimes you get those people, and they see that the change is good, and they come around. Sometimes they don't. I've worked for chefs that are like Carmen too, where it's like they know what they're doing, but they're really, really hard to work with, and so you kind of just have to get out of their way whenever you need to. And again, just everybody in this is somebody I recognized, and that was really impressive to me. That they not only really dialed in the minutia of how a kitchen works, but they also got the personalities of these people, not only how they operate in a kitchen, but then to actually get them to feel like people outside the kitchen that you give a shit about in a TV drama setting. It's really, really impressive, actually.
It is. I mean, I completely agree with everything you just said there. Without basically reiterating everything you just said, because you and I have both worked in restaurants, we can recognize the people and the personalities, like you said. The other side of this that you didn't really touch on that I will go into because you didn't, and I don't want to reiterate everything you just said because I didn't want to just
hog the conversation.
No. You're completely correct because that's exactly how I feel. I have a slightly different perspective on it because I was back of the house, and for me, I was a baker for a really long time, almost 9 years. And I also worked in other kitchens, fast food. I also worked in Olive Garden type places, stuff like that. I have not done the super high-end fine dining sous chef type stuff, but I have worked in enough kitchens to completely recognize everything that's going on here. Now, with all that being said, I'd like to look at it from a different perspective because I complain a lot about how stuff is filmed. And for me, this is filmed fantastically. I think
it's better as it goes too.
It absolutely does. All of the shots of the city give you this really perfect vibe of the setting that they're in and the reason that all of these people act the way they act. And
it's really funny you say that because I actually have a note in here. It's more specific to the last episode, but they're talking about like the scenery shots and everything. It does a really good. They do this really good job of tying in shots of the city, like the establishing shots of the city, but also interweaving it with shots of either the staff or the restaurant to really show the roots that this restaurant has in the city.
Well, it's also it's very cool when you see all of the different people in different modes of transportation headed to the restaurant to open it, and when you see Carmen walking to it, it's all of these things. Like you said, the establishing shots are so beautifully done that it really. One of the biggest problems I have with a lot of shows is they don't show you, they'll use the exact same establishing shot in every single episode to show you the front of the restaurant. And then they'll show you the sign of the restaurant. And then they'll go into the restaurant, right? And
Did
in
you notice there's no drone shots?
Yeah, I did notice that. There's zero drone shots. Yeah.
It really helps keep it grounded.
Yes, it does. And that's the thing, man, is the cinematography is not only just the scenery, inside too. There is so many good images of food being cooked in this show. It's beautiful. You get the
and not only that, it's beautiful because it's simple.
Yes,
like
exactly.
It's not like that. It's not like this crazy cinematography.
No,
they're not going over the top. They're using the cinematography to tell the story, which is what it's supposed to do. And they and they use it in such a good way. They don't go way over the top with it.
Right.
And I think that's why it works so well, is because they're not trying to make they're making beautiful images, but it doesn't look like they're trying to make beautiful images.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of that speaks to what kind of restaurant it is. They show, when they want you to feel Carmen's nostalgia for being in the best restaurant in the world, everything is really bright and colorful and really pristine. And the cinematography looks like it's right out of a cookbook with all of the different food shots and stuff like that. When we're in the restaurant, everything is really dirty, and they show you eggs on the floor and olive oil bottles tipped over and the grossness in the walk-ins. They use these really simple techniques to really drive home the fact of how not only all these people are feeling, but how damaged this store really is and how much it needs Carmen to pick it up and fix it. And like you said, it's very simple, but it's also masterfully done because the lighting is so goddamn good in this show. The cinematography is so good. The one thing I will say is that there's a little bit too much shallow depth of field in a lot of this.
There is. I'm glad you brought that up.
It's all over the place. But when it's done in a way that feels organic, it doesn't feel forced. And like, do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel like they were trying to blow everything out all the time. It feels like when they're focused on something, everything behind them is blown out. There's a lot of really close up face shots, and it's so that you can focus on what is happening and how that character is feeling, and not just to blow out the pretty Christmas lights behind them.
Yeah, and I gotta say the AC on the show knocks it out of the park on the an AC is going to be the guy or the girl pulling focus and all that stuff, and they really do a good job in this. The AC really knocks it out of the park in this.
Yeah. So, okay, well, with all that being said, I also real quick wanted to touch on the color grading. I know this may not be super interesting to everybody watching this, all the technical stuff, but the color grading is beautiful in this movie. It's a lot of blues, it's a lot of grays. I'm sorry, show. Yeah, I'm so used to talking about movies here. But it's a lot of blues and a lot of grays, and it goes back to what we were talking about. It really sells not only where this place is, but the vibe of everybody in it. And it almost gets brighter the more he's sort of picking stuff up and kind of fixing this. I don't know if you noticed, there's a part at the beginning where they open the down low coolers, and they're really gross. And then later they have fixed everything. She opens it. It's pristine. It looks new. It's organized. There are so many little things like that throughout this show that they don't even, it's not even there for most people to notice, but it's there if you're going to notice it. And that's the kind of stuff I really super appreciate in stuff like this. So, okay, well,
sure.
let's start off with let's just start off with the first episode a little bit. We're not going to remember everything episode by episode because we did both binge watch this in one sitting, or at least I binge watched it in one sitting. Did you watch it in one sitting?
I did watch it in one sitting. Yes.
You did?
I did end up reviewing this mostly from more of an overall perspective.
Right.
I
mostly just want to I mostly just want to talk about the first episode kind of compared to the last episode, and we can broad strokes the stuff in between. That's kind of what I wanted to do.
The main thing, because my notes for episode 1, a lot of it we've already gone over, but as far as just like the vibe of working in a kitchen and recognizing people that we've worked with in the characters on the show. The thing that stuck out to me that drew me in from the very, 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 very beginning is the fact that this movie opens with a work-related stress stream. And I cannot tell you how many restaurant stress streams I had over the 11 years that I worked in restaurants. It's constant. It is constant. And if you talk to any bartender, they'll tell you they hear printers in their sleep.
Yeah, I used to hear the baking racks being pushed around whenever I was a baker. I used to hear that in my sleep and like wake up out of anxiety that something was happening, that something was burning or whatever. Like it's a natural thing that happens when you spend that much time in a single place. When you spend 40 to 50 to 60 hours in one place a week, you stress about it, and you're gonna dream about it regardless of what else is going on in your life. So yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's go kind of broad strokes here then. If you kind of broke this down more broadly, how do you feel about Carmen? Let's just start there. Let's start with our main character. How do you feel about him as a person and as a character and his character development throughout this show so far?
I like him, and I get why he kind of like over the course of the season becomes asshole I mean, because he does become a bigger asshole as the season progresses.
Yeah.
And I totally get that. And the whole time I feel bad and angry for him.
It's interesting because you kind of hate Richie at first and you really like him. And it almost flips in the middle of the season where you start feeling for Richie and why he's so mad all the time. And Carmen becomes less likable.
I would not say I like Richie more. I just hate him less over the course of the season.
All right.
There is never a point in this when I'm sitting here going, I like Richie. I feel bad for him.
Really? Even the part where after they buy caulking and he's sitting in the car and he gets the phone call from his daughter.
No, because it's his fault. It's his fault. He's a self-destructive asshole. That's kind of how I feel about it. I mean, the dude is doing everything wrong and perpetuating what he's doing wrong while never having any introspection or self-awareness. He feels bad, but I feel like most of the time he just feels bad for himself and he's lashing out at other people
that's definitely
that he doesn't agree with.
Yeah. Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go back to Carmen.
But yeah, so I get why Carmen is the way that he is, and I feel bad for him, and I can kind of understand why he is the way that he is, because not just because of like his brother killing himself, which I'm just going to say this right now, I'm not convinced it was a suicide, but that's just kind of like my reading into a lot of stuff. Like, I'm interested to see what happens in season 2 because I'm still not convinced it was a suicide. I feel for Carmen because of what happened to his brother, but I also feel because I was also management in a restaurant. And so to watch him have to, like, whip these people into shape and then be stubborn and then see things get better. And this is why I hate Richie, because as things get better, you still have, which is true in restaurants, there's always a source of toxicity. Like there's always usually like one or two people that are a source of of perpetuating a toxic environment. And so and Richie is that source, because as everything's getting better, as everyone around him is trying to improve, he doesn't want to make things different because it's working for him regardless of how it's working for everyone else. So in that sense, I also felt really bad for Carmen, and I can really understand where he's coming from on that. And so no, through this whole episode, or through this whole season, I just feel bad for Carmen, and when he gets a small win, I'm rooting for him, and when he's not, most of the time, I'm frustrated for him, and I want things to work out, because the reason things aren't working out aren't because of the way he's acting. He's acting the way he is because people are screwing up so bad, and there's a really good example of that in like episode 5 or 6 with Sydney that we'll get into. Because I really want to touch on that, but yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Carmen from the very get-go.
Yeah, I mean, I think the strongest thing about this show for me is that it's really fun to watch this restaurant get better and to watch it start to succeed on its own merits before everything that happens in the last episode, because he works really hard to make this place work correctly. And he hires, the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, how are you going to turn a sandwich shop into a fine dining experience? As much as you're trying to, you can use all the locally organic source stuff that you want and all the top end beef and all of that kind of stuff. But at its heart, it is still a sandwich shop. And going into this, I really thought that this was going to be more about fine dining. Which is I was kind of worried about, but then when I found out that it is actually just sort of a sandwich shop that he inherited, I was almost more on board, because it
makes it more relatable.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It felt more relatable. It felt like that he worked really goddamn hard to get to a point where he was a sous chef in one of the best restaurant in the world. Speaking of which, what's his face was the chef that was insulting him?
So
Joel
good.
McHale.
He's so good.
He's so good in this. And he's only in it for like half a second, but it's
you
so
should be
good.
Dead.
But like,
he says that to his face.
Yeah.
You should be dead.
I mean, well, I kind of feel like I kind of feel like Carmen needs that. And by the time we get to the last episode where Carmen has that phenomenal monologue at Al-Anon.
Oh my God.
It is.
Oh my God. It's amazing.
Almost like an 8-minute monologue, I think. And it's the whole thing. I was on the edge of my seat from beginning to end to it, because it starts with a dream sequence. He wakes up, he goes to Al-Anon, and he just word vomits this stuff that has been touched on, but hasn't been said or felt yet. And
the way that whole monologue is written, it's not, because a lot of times you get a monologue that feels written.
Yeah.
Like it feels like it was written.
Yes.
This doesn't feel like it was written.
No, it
like,
feels very like it's coming out. He's thinking it as he's saying it. It's
both in delivery and the way it's written. It feels very realistic.
Yes.
It doesn't feel poetic.
Yeah. But I think by the time episode 1 is over, to the time we get to that monologue, I didn't really feel for him that much. Episode 1, when you find out everything that has happened, maybe it's episode 2 where they really touch on Mikey's suicide. The thing I feel like they could have touched on better, especially through his relationship with Richie, is the way he felt alienated and put out by his brother. Therefore, that forced him, or not forced him, but the way he chose to deal with that is by doing the fine dining thing. And I almost wish, and we may get this in season 2, but I want to see more of his journey through the fine dining world to get to a point where Cindy feels like he's the best cook the best chef that she's ever had food from. And the reason it almost doesn't work, it definitely does, but the reason it's almost not believable is because we don't get enough backstory of him going through the ranks of that stuff. It's touched on, but what I wanted, and maybe this is a symptom of it being a half an hour show and not an hour show because you don't have the time. Again, I'm in the middle of The Sopranos. They have all the time in the world to talk about what's going on in their head and to really dive deep into each character and how they're feeling. And in this, I just felt like they don't go deep enough. See, episode per episode throughout the entire season, they definitely touch on enough of it. But yeah, that's my only real complaint about Carmen's character is that I want more of his backstory, and we do get some of that by the end of the season, but it's just not, there's just not enough of it episode per episode. So let's also touch on Richie here while we're here, because Richie, I think, is one of the more interesting characters in this show. Because he's got a lot of flaws, but you can tell he's a good person at heart, even if he is a huge asshole. And that is kind of why I like him so much, is because he's not just there for you to feel bad about him. He's there because, like you said, he's definitely he's the toxic part of that restaurant for sure. But at the same time, I felt for him because you can tell he wants to do the right thing most of the time, but his anger gets in the way of what he wants to accomplish. And so he feels like a real person in that way.
Even the things he does that are, you consider screw ups, it's usually done for the sake of the restaurant.
Yeah.
Like selling Coke out in the back alley. Like that's obviously like, what are you doing, dude? But at the same time, it's the only way he knows how to keep everything afloat.
Right.
And he's dealing with the same problems that Carmen is as far as keeping everything running. The problem is Richie doesn't see the flaws as clearly as Carmen does until further into the season.
Well, and I think that his biggest issue is that he holds on to the past, and he never really processed Mikey's suicide. And because of that, and he even says it, like, the reason I don't want you guys screwing with this place is because it messes with the environment. He's like, the bar closed next door, everything's changing, and he just doesn't know how to deal with that. And because he doesn't have the tools to deal with that, most of his emotions just come out as anger when you can see when he's searching for his gun, when Cindy goes out to talk to all the guys in front of the restaurant. That's a great
Sydney, by the way, Sydney.
I thought it was Cindy. When Sydney has to go out in front and talk to all those people, and Richie's in the back looking for his gun. And when he realized that Sydney is taking care of this without going out there and just threatening everybody, it feels like a real turning moment in his character, because it almost feels like that's the moment where he kind of realizes, like, oh, change is not necessarily a bad thing, and if I embrace this a little bit more, then I think I will be maybe a happier person. And so that he feels like a real person, which is, dude, it's huge points to the writers, because the writers, every character in here feels like an actual human being. And I think a big part of that is because we have met a lot of people like this in that business. So, okay. So while we're talking about her, let's talk about Sydney and not Cindy. I think maybe she might be my favorite person on this show. I don't know how you feel about her, but
she's my least favorite.
She's your least favorite. Why?
She is my least favorite because she's arrogant, but naive as hell. And I did not like her because she doesn't, again, this is all coming from work experience, but you don't just come in because of a title. And granted, a lot of the situations she has to take charge in that she's totally out of her element in.
Well, that's also put upon her, though. She doesn't ask for any of that. That's put upon her, yeah.
I decided I really hated Sydney when everything goes wrong with the to-go order system. And I hated her because she's the one that's screwed up, and then while everything's going downhill, she quits.
Right.
And I hated her for that. I hated her for
I mean,
it.
that's definitely a fair point. The reason I like her though is because she is the person that we get to come into this restaurant with. And you and I both know what it's like to walk into a restaurant that you have not worked at before, and you're the new person, and everybody else already has this dynamic happening, and you have no idea how you fit into that dynamic.
I've always described it as coming to a party that's been raging for 4 hours that you don't know anyone at.
Yeah, I mean,
That's how it feels coming into a new restaurant, regardless of what part of the restaurant you're in. Even when I was washing dishes, it's like like you said, everybody has this dynamic. There's a workflow and there's relationships. Restaurants are really cliquey already.
yeah.
And when you come into that, it's very without getting into too much of my backstory, it's a lot like walking into jail because it's this really it's and what I mean by that is you have to come in and you can't show people that you're nervous or anxious or not afraid, but you have to go in kind of stone-faced. Otherwise, people are going to walk all over you until you make them stop doing it.
Yeah, well, I
That's
mean,
not good, by the way, but that's just how it is.
well, I, to be a little more relatable to most people, I think the better way to put it is going to a new high school. And because of the cliques and because all those people grew up together, they all know each other. They've known each other since they were 10. And you're walking in there as a brand new person, you don't know anybody, and everybody already has this dynamic that they are super comfortable with, and you walk in there and not only mess with the dynamic, but feel like the outsider. And I think that's why Sydney is so relatable in this show. Because like I said, she's the vehicle we walk into this restaurant with. And I almost feel like I definitely, well, I'll say this. I like her a lot until she quits. You and I have been in that moment before where everything is going wrong. You got a dozen, if not more, to-go orders popping up on your screen. You don't know how to deal with it. Everybody is freaking out, trying to deal with their own stuff. And then somebody is just like, I can't do this. I can't do it. And they walk out on you. Well, what's funny is the other side of that is Marcus, the guy who is obsessed with making cakes and donuts and stuff like that. I've also known people like that where they just put their heart and soul into that place and they get nothing out of it. And the management and the people running the place don't care at all. And it's not literal having their work thrown on the ground the way it is here. But I have known people who go through that where they put their heart and soul into a thing and the management just doesn't give a shit. And in a moment of everything kind of falling apart, they just push it just a little too far. And the people are just like, this. I don't need this. I can go anywhere.
To be fair, Marcus was asked many, many times to get his together. He saw everything falling apart around him, and he still went, no, I'm going to do this. Now, don't get me wrong. I like Marcus. I like Marcus because Marcus is one of those people that has a passion for what he's doing, but he doesn't have the means of going and getting like professional training.
Right.
And so he pursues that passion and getting better with the means he has at his disposal. So I really do like Marcus, but again, this is another thing where it's like, yeah, Carmen's an asshole when he smacks the dessert out of his hand, but to be fair, everything was falling apart around him, and Marcus still got yelled at several times and still chose not to do what he needed to do. And so it's like, yeah, it's a total overreaction, but you kind of had that one coming, dude.
Well, that goes to speak for everybody in this restaurant, except Carmen has little to no experience dealing with high volume, especially in a restaurant like this. And it's funny because Sydney, her whole thing is her catering business got too big too fast. And it's almost like she has repeated that with leaving the pre-orders open, which is how that whole chaotic thing started, and she's almost repeating that exact same thing by giving this reviewer food that's not on the menu, making the reviewer think that this place is maybe better than it possibly is, especially with food that's not on the menu, which forces all of these people to want to eat at this place. And then she leaves the pre-orders open, and you can really see why her catering business failed. And I just thought that was really super interesting, because she's repeating the exact same mistakes as she did with her own business.
Yeah, she's stupid. I don't like her.
Well, I mean, I definitely agree that, like, she's way less likable when she quits. It is interesting that she decides to come back, but only after she sees spoiler alert here. We're going to be getting into spoilers. Only after she sees piles of money being thrown on the ground.
I think she made that decision already, though. That's why she came back, right?
Well, no, because he texts her, your last check is ready to be picked up. That's what he texts her whenever they're going back and forth on the phone. So in theory, she's there. Realistically, yeah, probably. She already made that decision on the way back, because where the hell else is she going to go? Why would you want to start someplace fresh? But especially when she sees that Carmen finally has the means to turn this place into what they want to turn it into. She's down to come back, which is a little. I will definitely admit that. It's definitely a little. What are some of your other thoughts? Because I don't want to just talk about just characters here. I would also like to get into some of the plot points. We don't have to go into specifics necessarily.
I'm really interested to see where all of this goes. I do. I want to see. I want to see more of Cicero's backstory, for sure. Because I really like the guy that is that Oliver Platt plays Cicero. That's Oliver Platt, right?
Yes, it is. Uncle Jimmy. Yeah.
I like Oliver Platt. I want to see kind of where that goes, because there's obviously an organized criminal aspect to his involvement.
Right.
So I am really, really interested to see where that goes. I'm interested to see what happens when he finds out that they've got all this money now.
That's my thing, is all of that money that Mikey was taking from Uncle Jimmy obviously was the money in the tomato cans. And because it, like Carmen even brings it up, what's KBL electricity or whatever it was. You find out KBL, huh?
We still don't know what KBL is.
No, we do, because they show the letters KBL on the bottom of one of the tomato cans. It's one of the last shots in the show.
Right, but we don't know like what the connection is there yet.
No, we do.
Like,
what he was doing was he was writing these off as expenses going to some fictional company, which was KBL, but instead of paying somebody off, he was taking that money and shoving it into tomato cans, which adds up to the exact amount of money that he took from Uncle Jimmy. So there is... what we know is at least $300,000 sitting in those tomato cans. So when Uncle Jimmy, you're right, because when Uncle Jimmy finds out that they have that $300,000 that Carmen owes him, he is not going to be happy, especially when he finds out that he's going to use this money to turn this place from the Beef, or whatever the place was called. It's the Beef, right?
The Beef.
Into
it sounds
the
like a really
Bear.
bad strip club.
Yeah, it does sound like a bad. That's disgusting. So anyway. I think you're right. That's going to be super interesting. The other thing is the word consistency comes up over and over and over again. And what I find interesting about that is that that restaurant might be the least consistent place of all time. And as we go throughout the coming seasons, it's going to be interesting how the word consistency plays into this show, because it's all Carmen wants. He brings it up constantly. He wants consistency. The thing he likes about fine dining in the higher end world is the consistency. He liked having his ass kicked consistently. He liked all of that stuff. And the thing that he is lacking the most is consistency in his life while running the Beef. And it is going to be really interesting how and if he can bring consistency into the Bear. Because as far as I'm concerned, this show has just got started, and I think, in my opinion, this is one of the better half-hour shows that I have seen in a really long time.
Well, I think the half-hour aspect actually works really well. And we got to remember, this is an actual TV show too, and so there is that aspect to it. I find that a lot of the times, when we do have shows that have an hour-long episode, they're either streaming only. Or they're on like HBO.
Right.
And so I think that's got a big part to do with why every episode is only a half hour.
One of the things I will say is at the end of this, when Mikey smiles into the camera it's the very last shot of this season. The thing that came into my head was I never need another episode of this series. I feel like if I never got a season 2, which I think they've already greenlit a season 2. I'll have to look into that.
I would imagine they have.
I really feel like I don't need a season 2.
No, I need a season 2. I need a season 2 for multiple reasons. I have to find out what happens with the money. Because when they change the name of the restaurant and they make improvements, Uncle Jimmy's gonna want to know how. And so I want to know what happens there. I want to know who the fuck Nico is. I want to...
That's a good point. That's something we haven't even touched on. Yeah. That's interesting.
I gotta say that this last episode, by the way, I'm so glad we finally find out what's in that envelope, because that was driving me goddamn batty through the whole season.
The cool thing is the way they plant that envelope in like season 2 or something, or episode 2. Maybe it's the first episode. I can't quite remember. But what is in that envelope plays so well into his monologue about who Mikey was as a person. And then it also plays into him getting the money at the end of it. And it's just, dude, it's so well done. There will be a season 2. Yeah, so that's what I was about to say. On July 14th, which is just 14 days ago, 2 weeks ago, they did announce that they renewed The Bear for season 2, and it will stream exclusively on Hulu. So
yeah, and we will be covering. I would like to cover this episode by episode this time
for sure.
When season 2 starts,
I have notes. Episode by episode here. So we could definitely have done that. On one hand, we might be better off going episode by episode as we record it. Watching an episode and then recording how we feel about that episode.
I think this is the best way for us to approach this, though, because there's already a full season out.
Right.
So I think this made more sense.
Yeah.
One more thing. I just saw this in my notes. The scene that hit the hardest for me in this season is when he goes home from making this amazing food all day long, and then has a dinner of PB&J chips and a can of Coke.
Yeah, I have that written down as well. Yeah,
that hit hard, because I was sitting here going like, oh God, it was that depressing.
Yeah,
it always felt depressing, but now I see it and it is depressing. But that's how it is. So this is why I always said, if you've never worked in a restaurant before, it should be mandatory that everybody spends 6 months in a restaurant so you can know how this feels, because it helps. It helps when you go out to eat. But yeah, going back to like season 2 and everything, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with Uncle Jimmy when he finds out. I'm interested to see who the hell Nico is. I'm interested to see what happens with Richie. The dude got an aggravated assault charge. That doesn't just not include a court case, and that doesn't not include jail time. So I'm interested to see what happens there. I'm interested to see the development of Marcus and to see what goes on there. I'm interested to see what happens with Sydney, because I want to like her more.
Well, I think they can definitely play on her looking up to Carmen, right? Because when her and Marcus have that conversation about like who is the best restaurant that you've ever eaten at, and the food came from Carmen, that moment is really special, because you can tell, she says it in the first episode when he hires her, that like, hey, I know who you are and I really kind of look up to you, but it doesn't really hit until her and Marcus are sitting there talking about it. And she says he made the best food that I've ever eaten in my entire life. And so they can really play that relationship up a lot in the next season, especially if they're going to convert that place into a fine dining place. So
yeah, for sure.
What I will say, what I wanted to touch on about the half an hour thing, I think the last episode of this season shows, because of the slower paced, the longer conversations like the one I was just talking about between her and Marcus, the conversation that Richie and Carmen have outside when they're having the bachelor party, that whole conversation is really interesting, and it's really slow, and they hang on to moments for a long time. That's the kind of stuff That's the kind of stuff that makes me wish this show was an hour, because you can really dig deep into the relationship with all of these people in that setting that you can't really get into with a half an hour show. So
I think with it being a public or a cable television show, though,
yeah,
I
it's on
just
FX.
I just don't think we're ever going to get that. Now, if it's exclusive to Hulu,
Well, they have the exclusive streaming rights. So it's not a Hulu original.
So it'll be on FX.
Shows on FX.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, my point stands. If it's gonna be on FX, it's gonna. I'm calling it right now. We're gonna just keep getting half-hour long episodes with 45-minute to hour-long finales.
The final thought here that I wanna touch on is, I think what makes this show so interesting and so relatable is Carmen wants to be a consistent, peaceful, organized person. He's not, by his very nature. He's very chaotic, and you can tell...
Very emotional.
He's very emotional, yes. And so I'm really interested to see the character development that goes on with him, because... God damn it, is it interesting. This show is just interesting. It's fun to watch. It's deep, but it's not so deep that it's up its own ass. And it's well shot. It's well directed. It's well written. This show's great. It's great. And I had heard nothing but good things about it, and I'm really glad that we got to sit down and talk about this, because it's great. It's one of the best half-hour shows I've watched in years, in literal years.
You know what I want to do next if we do another TV show? When you finish The Sopranos, I want to do an episode on The Sopranos.
I don't know if that's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea.
I think you're going to need to rewatch it before we do that.
That's what I think. I think what we should do is we'll simplify it, and we'll just do what you think of the ending of The Sopranos. That's what I want the episode to be.
All right, I'll think about it. Okay. Do you have any final thoughts? About the bear before we get out of here?
No, man, not more than what you said. I'm just gonna end up reiterating what you said. Honestly, the thing that stands out for me is this show can appeal to everybody. Even if you don't have experience in the restaurant industry, there's a lot to like here. There's a lot to dive into here. There's a lot to enjoy. If you have been in the restaurant industry, which I would say more of the population has worked in a restaurant setting than hasn't, you're gonna like this even more. Either way,
interesting stat to look at.
Either way, like I said, regardless of how you're watching this and what perspective and background you're coming from, this show really is incredible. It really, really is, because we get the drama of some of the best dramas on TV without it being criminal drama or overtly criminal drama. Because I find like a lot of the shows that are some award-winning dramas, there's always a criminal aspect to it. And there's definitely a nefarious aspect to a lot that's going on here. But it's one of the few shows that I've watched that doesn't seem over the top on a lot of stuff. Sons of Anarchy, Breaking Bad, The Sopranos, The Wire, all of these have a criminal aspect to them. And I get it, it's entertaining drama, because to a lot of people, it's a fantasy world versus a real world with fantasy dipped in, which when with this, we have a real world scenario with real world, like the criminal stuff going on in this show is stuff that happens in restaurants. I've worked in restaurants where people are selling drugs out the back door.
We both worked at one place where that was happening in front of everyone. Yeah.
In front of everyone. So that's what I'm saying is the criminal aspect, or the criminal aspects of this movie even those are rooted in reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why this is so good compared to some of those other shows. I was never really able to get into Breaking Bad and Weeds is another great example of that. It just goes off the rails and becomes unbelievable at a certain point.
Wow.
And maybe
she would have been dead in season 1 in the real world.
Well, that may happen to this eventually, but for now, with we're only talking about season 1, this is very grounded, which is why this is so good. This feels like somebody who actually went through these experiences. I almost have the same feeling as the first time I watched Waiting, whereas that's like a much more comedy aspect of this stuff, but I almost feel the same way where you're like, oh, that's this guy, and I've worked with this guy at 5 different places. Like,
This is like Bob's Burgers meets Waiting without any of the comedy.
yeah, I mean, and
There's
that's the
comedy
thing
moments,
that really
but-
struck me is like Waiting felt like that when I watched it for the first time when it first came out so many years ago. This feels very grounded, which is why it works. All of the pieces are there for it to go off the rails in the next season. But I think it's grounded enough that I'm hoping we won't have that issue. So
I really don't think we're going to. I think as long as we still have the same people writing, directing, and producing, those are really the elements that are going to keep it together from a storytelling perspective. So as long as we still have the input from those people, I think we'll be okay. I hope we'll be okay.
well,
I
I mean,
think we'll be okay.
I will say. Episode 3 is the first episode where the creator and writer didn't direct it, and I genuinely felt like that was one of the better directed episodes. So I would like to see them maybe fluctuate some other directors in there to maybe get some other different directing styles going on. But other than that, I totally agree. I think as long as the same people are running the ship, this is going to be one of those shows that I wait for every year to come out until we're finished with it. So,
Yep,
and
for
that is
sure.
surprising for a half-hour show for me. So, if you guys like this, make sure you hit the like button. If you really liked it, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Did you not like this? Hit the thumbs down button and maybe leave a comment as to why you maybe disagree with anything that we're saying here. I have heard nothing but good things said about this, so it would be really interesting to hear from somebody who actually didn't like this or maybe couldn't get into it. So we're going to call it there for the day. Thank you guys for watching so much, and we will see you guys next time from the deep. Bye-bye.
Ta-ta.